Good morning, Anthony Franco. You're looking spry and full of holiday cheer. In 1952, Edwin Land, terrific name by the way, Edwin Land introduced the world to Polaroid camera, a product that didn't just disrupt an industry, but created one. The launch was a masterclass in precision, a clear vision, anticipation of customer needs, and flawless execution. Today, the same principles apply even in our fast-paced digital world, Anthony. So how can today's founders replicate success? We're talking about the art of the launch, but before we do, Anthony, we have a shout out.
Yeah, so I talked to an entrepreneur last night, Jeff Kutas, Kutas, who runs a company called MB Sentinel. And the only reason why I would shout him out is because, Chris, he's the reason why we are skyrocketing in Spotify listenership. He has listened to every single one of our episodes. So I just wanted to
Jeff
and say thanks a lot. And MB Sentinel is they make the box grabber, I think is what he called it. It's a huge, he called it a first world problem. A huge mailbox for Amazon deliveries that have a touch code on it that you like build into your home.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I was imagining a box grabber as, like one of those little handle things like you pick up trash with. Jeff.
A gobbler, box gobbler.
Box gobbler. That's amazing.
That's what he called it, yeah.
Jeff, thank you for listening. And sorry to we've, sorry for you having to.
Huge.
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 Something tells me that Jeff may be on mushrooms right now. But thank you anyway, Jeff. Yeah, that's amazing.
And Chris, I do want to say, Tim wasn't able to join us today. So if you're expecting Tim on the podcast, he apologizes, but wasn't able to join. I know he's on the invite for the podcast on LinkedIn and YouTube. Sorry he wasn't here, but Chris and I are going to try to plow on without his expertise. Good news is that we've both done the launch thing. Yeah,
and now the 4 people that were going to listen are not going to listen anymore. We could have just teased it, like maybe Tim was going to show up later. Like, we don't know. We'll see if we can.
He could show up.
Tim could show up later. We don't know. All right, Anthony, let's talk about the launch. I actually am excited the fact that I get to talk to you about this because I was, before we started doing this, when we were just entrepreneurial friends, I was wildly impressed with how you pulled off some of your launches and some of your previous companies. And so you are a terrific expert to talk about this, but let's just start from the beginning. I know a lot of people that don't really think the launch matters. You just kind of put it out there. Let's see what happens. You do closed beta, you do an open beta, and just kind of let it sort of simmer before it catches fire. Why does a big, star-studded, amazing launch, why does it matter?
It doesn't. It's really kind of interesting to talk about this because we talk a lot about launching a product, and what you have to do first before you launch is get a lot of customer feedback and talk to folks and make sure your idea is a valid one, your solution is a valid one, and the problem is big enough. So when we talk about launch, what we're talking about is, all right, you've done your homework. Most importantly, you've done your homework. You've done the upfront work. You really believe that you have something special, and now you need to launch with the bang, right? You need to really get out there and create essentially some buzz. It can be a make or break moment for startups. they focus on building their product and neglect the equally crucial task of planning their launch. A lot of folks will do stuff like, well, I'm just going to throw it up on Kickstarter and see what happens. I'm gonna launch it, and it's the field of dreams. You build it and they will come, and that doesn't happen. You have to architect your launch exactly as if you're architecting your product. It is part and parcel with your product. Does that?
Yeah, I mean, you're hitting, when I say that I like to talk about go to market stuff, this is exactly the stuff I like to talk about the most, is because you spent all this time and energy building this perfect solution. You've talked to customers, you're solving a real pain point, and then people go like, awesome, we're open for business. And nobody walks in the metaphorical door.
Sound.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And they get really discouraged and they get sad. And they said, I've spent so much time on this product. And this is one of the major myths that we face, Anthony, the myth of pent-up demand, that if you just build the perfect product, like customers will just magically show up. And yeah, it's pretty true. Maybe, actually, I don't think it's true at all anymore. I think you have to figure out a way to actually tell people about your product and what problems it's solving and why you should care. And so I do think the launch gives you this unique moment in time. You never stop marketing. You have to continue to market and sell your entire time you're in business. But in this moment, you have this unique opportunity to just really make a splash and a bang. I want you I'm going off script here a little bit, Anthony. Talk a little bit about a couple of your launches. And when you did use Kickstarter, I thought that was masterful how you did that. Talk just about some of the strategies you've used in the past just to set the frame of how to start to think about launches.
Well, first I want to go back a step and say we have a script.
It's a metaphorical script, Anthony. It's a metaphorical script.
I've been doing these podcast things wrong. I didn't know we had a script.
You haven't been reading the script? Oh my God. What a disaster.
Look, if I'm being honest, I did a Kickstarter campaign. I've done multiple Kickstarter campaigns and multiple equity crowd raises. And I wouldn't recommend them.
Fair enough.
Just because there's this notion that you can just launch and attract customers, like those crowdfunding sites and Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and Start Engine for equity and WeFunder for equity. It's not where you have to bring your own audience to your launch. So the really hard part about a launch, the most difficult part is figuring out launch to who. Right?
We call that work persona work, Anthony. It's really hard.
I mean, picture yourself. You prepare this incredible dance that you're gonna perform, and you go to a football stadium to perform it, and there's nobody in the stands. So you did all this. So you have to figure out a way to build an audience to launch to. So the way the most successful launches that I've seen are it's almost like unfair because they've already built their audience before they've launched the product. And then you get into this like catch-22. How do you build an audience pre-launch before so that you have a successful launch? It's a cheat code. The cheat code for launching is you have your audience set up first. So you have to do a lot of upfront work in order to gain followers. Social media followers is great. Going to meetups and trade shows and handing out your card, like that's grassroots. But you have to start building people aware of you before you can build them to be aware of your product or your service that you're going to launch.
Or you can start a podcast and try to find followers that way. Scale OS launching in January to the public. Stay tuned, everybody.
Scale OS. We now have 4 customers.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So it is hard. We know it's important. And I think that the key here is what we said is that it is a unique moment in time. It's an opportunity. I've heard people get really down when they don't have the launch that they want to. You could still build a great company. You could still build a great marketing and sales engine. But this launch really does, it represents a very unique moment where people will care about you just because you're new. And that is kind of interesting, right? I think that's kind of the thing that founders should think about going into this stage.
Well, so the critical mistake I see founders make when they build their startup is they pour all of their time and energy and resources and money into building the product, and they don't have any budget to evangelize the thing that they just built. They can't even afford the ticket to the trade show or $500 on Facebook ads. I mean, it is a classic thing that I see with SaaS companies and physical product companies and services companies alike. You put all of this energy and effort into the product, and then you just were like, well, I've already kind of blown this much money on the project, and I haven't gotten anybody to sign up for it. So why would I pour money into the signing up, into creating awareness? And I mean, you've seen that too, right, Chris? Where it's like,
seen it, Anthony. I've lived that son of a bitch.
You've run a marketing agency where I actually do consulting on launching, and it's like, we have this great product and we have no money to launch it. It's like, well, then who cares? It's the tree in the forest analogy. What do you think?
Yeah. First of all, I owe you 10 push-ups for cursing. Sorry.
You did?
Yeah. I was talking when you were talking. I was going to say I've lived not having any money to launch. But yeah, it is a terrific challenge, and it's also one of the kind of ideas I wanted to throw out at you is there is no such thing as a single launch. What if it's a rolling launch? Can you do that? Or is it just this thing where you're like, look, we are coming out to the public one time and we're trying to create buzz? The idea there being is that you don't really know what your product's going to be the first time it touches customers' hands, even the second time, maybe the third time. Is there such thing as a single launch day where you launch a product and you go into the world and you go live and everything's great? Or is it one of those things that kind of can be a month, 2 months, 6 months?
Well, one of my favorite books on this is, and I don't even know if we have it in our resources, but it's a book called Play Bigger. And the concept behind Play Bigger, it's worthwhile for anybody thinking about becoming an entrepreneur. And Play Bigger talks about these things about lightning bolts and thunderclaps. Lightning bolt moments are the huge, big splash that you could do on low budget, right? So I'll give you an example. A lightning bolt thing that we did is at Effective, which was an agency that worked on user interfaces for Fortune 100 companies. We went to a trade show, didn't have a booth, and we handed out boxer shorts that said, don't just focus on the back end.
That's a great one. That's clever.
And this was it's not even my idea. It was Rebecca Flavin, who's a brilliant marketer. She had this idea of writing on the back of boxer shorts. So we handed out, and it was a lightning bolt. We kind of bogarted the audience of the trade show. Now, did we get in trouble by this trade show? The people that put on the trade show, a little bit, like, you shouldn't really be doing this. And so I handed him a boxer short. He's like, this is funny. All right, we got but you have to be willing to kind of get in a little bit of trouble for those low budget lightning bolt moments where you go in and attach yourself to somebody else's big event. And so that's one example of how you can launch, right, with a lightning bolt. And then there's thunderclaps, which are the like you talked about, these ancillary, smaller reminders of the lightning bolt. And I can't come up with a great example with the boxer shorts, other than the emails that we sent out, and and other tchotchkes that we handed out. Um, but thinking about that as rolling, and then you think so you essentially plan your lightning bolt and your thunderclaps before you start, and then once you've run that campaign, you have to think of the next, what's our next lightning bolt moment, and hopefully you have some budget now where you're not doing the guerrilla style marketing that we did. So I'm over answering your question, but yeah, the answer is you should always be launching.
Yeah.
Or thinking about what that launch is.
And coffee is for closers, and you always need to be launching. That's a really good point. All right. So we know now that launching, there is this unique moment in time, but you still need to have that mentality throughout your time that you're spending as you're kind of getting your product up and going. And you see this constantly with bigger companies that they're always trying to create buzz around some sort of launch. I mean, back in the heyday with Apple, when there was a new product release, it was such a huge event, and it just dominated tech news. It dominated mainstream news when that happened.
I've been to a couple of those launches.
Have you really? Was it pretty cool?
I got to see Steve Jobs on stage. Yeah, it was, and they presented one of the products that we built at Effective, so it was pretty damn cool. Yeah.
This is a moment, if you are listening to us, and I'm going to assume that Jeff is like this as well, having listened to every episode. Like that's like a fan of rock being able to be like, hey, I saw the Beatles live. Like that is really cool. That's a really cool thing. I didn't know that you got to do. Yeah. All right. So we know that it's important. We know we have to continue to do it. We know that there's a higher likelihood of success for a company. And we didn't touch on these, but pre-launch hype increases sales up to 40% of some products and services. A poorly planned launch can result 60% of startups failing to meet their revenue goals in the first year. It's always tough because you don't know what their revenue is. Our revenue goal is $1 billion. But let's talk about, so we know it's important. We know we've got to do it. We know that there's some pitfalls. We know that oftentimes we're poor. We don't have enough money to do it the way we want to do it. But let's start to talk about the strategy. How do you think about it? What are the steps that you go through? And I like the idea of Thunderbolt and Lightning Clap. Is there any other frameworks that you think about?
Thunderclap.
Lightning Bolt. What did I say? Thunderbolt.
You said you mixed them up. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I'm dyslexic, Anthony. I'm surprised I could speak English.
It was just, I was like, wait a minute, I couldn't let it go. Sorry, Chris. My
OCD
would not let me let that go.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm dyslexic. You're OCD. This is a terrific neurodiverse show. All right. So how do you think about this? Like, what is the framework that you go through?
I wish there was like so you're gonna get a lot of like launch frameworks. You're gonna do, hopefully you're gonna Google search this and get a lot of people telling you that they can launch you successfully. They're all full of stuff.
I've already cussed, so I've already ruined the episode.
I almost had to click the profanity filter for our episode right there. It is highly dependent on what you're like. There's no generic answer to this other than the first thing that you need to do is really understand the messaging that's going to work for your product to your audience. So you have to do a lot of upfront homework to understand deeply the pain that you're solving and for who, and why your solution is the best. And then you got to figure out a way to get in front of them using the language that's going to resonate with them well. Another great way to do this, and we've talked about it in the past, is the Life Force 8 from the book Cashvertising, where you can start to create messaging triggers based on how people buy before you launch. So you need to understand, you need to go through a growth marketing or launch marketing process in order to understand what is the messaging you're going to use, who you're going to use it to, what's their pain point. So that's all the boring homework, heavy lifting stuff. And then the first thing is, how do I get in front of the most people in a way that nobody else has gotten in front of those people in the past. So whatever has the growth marketing hack 101 is growth marketing hacks work one time. So if I were to tell you go do this, then it wouldn't work because everybody would be doing it. So you have to figure out a sideways way of getting in front of as many people as you possibly can. That is on the edge of breaking the rules, but not illegal. and then you have to have the other really critical part of launching, Chris, is what's your follow-up process. So I see this happen all the time as well. It's okay, so I've developed this great lightning bolt moment. I've got a lot of awareness. I've got traction. I've got a lot of people excited about the product or service that I'm offering. And then there's no follow through on it. We don't call the people back, or we don't do drip marketing campaigns, sending them emails, reminding them to come click in. So it's the follow through on the launch that is also something that you need to plan out. Now, those are generic rules of thumb. Chris, I'd love if you could give some like more examples, practical examples around that.
Yeah. So the first thing is that you're dead right, Anthony. This is a classic that a experienced go-to-market or growth marketer would tell you to do, which is first understand your market. Market rules every single tactic and rules every single strategy. If you don't understand your market, you have no right to offer a product and service in that market. That is fundamental when you go in. So start with deeply understanding the market, understanding the pain points, then build personas. That's classic market segmentation. You, as a startup, will never have enough money to execute on every single one of your tactics. So figure out which are your most important customer segments to go talk to. We use the example of building personas. Other people say customer avatars, etc. And then drivers. Drivers are the things that will motivate that person to that product and service. The Life Force 8 is a classic example, very low level fundamental drivers. If you can get to something deep, the main piece that you just really hit on is don't over engineer a launch, because you won't be able to execute it. You are busy. You're going to be doing sales. You're going to be doing all this work. Make sure that you do something that is simple and can execute well. The worst possible thing you can do is go out and build a very complicated marketing system of which it completely fails. And you say, hi, first name, this is Chris. Just keep it simple, but execute it incredibly well to a small group of people. That is how the growth marketer thinks about this problem.
Yeah, and to add something, before you launch as well, you have to really, and maybe this is its own podcast episode, Chris, but there's this notion of you have the customer. This happens quite a bit. So I'm struggling. I apologize for struggling with articulating this, but oftentimes you have the end customer and the customer that's actually going to buy from you, and those are two different people. And so you have to make a decision before you launch. Who are you going to target? You cannot target both. If you have a great example is Jeff, who I spoke to yesterday. So his end customer is the homeowner that installs this big huge mailbox in their house, either in a column out front of their home or in the side of their house, right at their porch, and there's different, or just as a big box out sitting outside. And does he target the homeowner, or does he target the home builders that build these high-end homes, or does he target the suppliers that supply those home builders? And each one of those, and if you say all of them, you're not going to target any of them. So you have to not only decide how you're going to launch and who you're going to launch, but that who is more important about who do you think you're going to be able to gain the most traction with. And one of the big critical factors on deciding that is what's your signal to noise ratio to those individuals. Try to find the lowest signal to noise ratio for the who, when you're deciding on who, and then how do you break through a signal? Did any of that make sense? That felt like I was rambling.
No,
That's normal.
you actually nailed yeah, exactly. Well, what else is new, Anthony? It's a critical decision point, and it really is one of those things that is early in your company's life. It is a make or break moment. But I'm gonna give you a little bit of a reprieve in a moment. You have to decide how you're going to go to market, and what are you going to. So what you're discussing there is, are you going to find a channel to sell through?
Mm-hmm.
I know very smart entrepreneurs that would say they would never try to go directly to their end customer early, that they just want to work with channel sales, even if it cuts into their margin, even if it cuts into they have to work directly with other people, even if it's a pain in the ass, because they have a relationship with customers already, and they can get there way faster. So channels are a terrific opportunity. They are not a panacea. Working with channel partners, they can be finicky. They can go with a competitor. They are oftentimes a real pain in the ass. You have to be good at that thing. Here's the reprieve, which is whether you choose to go direct to a customer, whether you go through a channel, or whether you go through if you're a consumer product, whether you go through somebody like Amazon or eBay, or whether you got to try to go direct e-commerce, all of those things are a test. And it's okay to fail on those, so long as you don't put all of your eggs into a single basket. Once you decide the basket where you're going to go to market, really focus on it and try to go well. But it's okay to do very small and incremental tests to try to figure out the place where you'll find traction. It's hard because when you're doing small tests, you have a very limited amount of data, but just continue to work on it. And Anthony, this goes back to that really fundamental of marketing and go to market, which is you got to understand your market, and you got to ask those questions early to try to discover what is that best pathway to the customer. And that's all you're trying to do. What is the best pathway to the person who has your money in their pocket?
I agree. And I'm actually, as we're talking, I'm adding another podcast episode that we have to do, and that's developing channels. I realize that is something we absolutely have to talk about is developing channels.
It is not easy, and a lot of people think, entrepreneurs, like, oh, well, it's no big deal. I'll just go do channel sales because it's going to be way easier. Remember, you lose margin and you lose control, and for a founder, that is really difficult because you don't have that ability to pivot and change. You don't have that direct relationship with the customer early on. And so some channel partners will give you that, but oftentimes you're losing a lot of control in the middle of that transaction.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Okay.
So how do you, I'll ask you this question, Chris. So let's say you have a pretty decent launch. How do you sustain momentum?
Launch again, Anthony.
Launch again.
It's a great point, and this is where you say, if you understand your market, there are cadences throughout the year of which you want to blitz. One of the biggest mistakes and fallacies, it took me a long time to learn this, by the way, is if you think about every single advertiser that you see on television or you see online, you will see them in short bursts, and then there's a period where they go dark. And that is purposeful. They want to blast you with information and then give you a break from that information. And so you need to plan around these peaks and valleys. Typically that's quarterly. So typically you say, hey, look, I'm going to do my next big push the quarter after I launch. And it's going to be month one of that quarter. And then I'm going to do the second month as follow-up. And I'm going to try to harvest all of those sales in the third month. And then I'm going to do it again. And you just have a cadence of continuing to blast out, try to be really, really loud, get attention, and then figure out a way to harvest those sales behind it. So plan, but to your point, Anthony, you got to plan that on day one as you're sitting down mapping this out. Like, hey, I'm going to launch here, but it's not I launch and then I buy a Tesla. You've got to continue to follow up and do the next and the next and the next.
Yeah. So there's an interesting perspective here. There's this notion of restaurants do this all the time. It's called a soft launch. So it's a test launch to test how you're going to actually launch. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we do things called closed betas or limited betas, things like that in
Yeah.
technology as well. It's the same idea, which is people will forgive you your foibles if you just tell them right off the bat, like, "Hey, this isn't fully baked. I'm giving you a deep discount." You know, in soft launches, oftentimes now soft launches in restaurants, they'll charge you the full amount. But it used to be, well, they'll give you free food for them to go through the system. And if your food's slow, who cares? Because it's free food. And then, all you pay is the tip. It is a great opportunity to just tell people, set the expectations that you're going through this early phase. And the other piece of this, do not, do not do a deep discount or free or lifetime free, which are all great techniques, without a specific ask of sharing your product, of talking about your product, of posting it on social media, about getting testimonials. All that can be incredibly valuable. It just drives me nuts when founders do all this work to get these people in the door and they don't ask them for anything in return. It's like, yeah, congratulations, you've got some people using your stuff. Now, what are you going to do with that? Have them do a testimonial. Have them talk to their
Yes.
friends. Have them send an
Yes.
email for you. Anything like that.
I agree. Yeah. So there is a give to get. They're getting some value out of you, so you should be able to get some value out of them. Um, that can help you market it. One thing on that though, um, a mistake that I often see service providers, service providing founders make is they'll go do a lot of free work for a brand, a big name brand, because the big name brand is going to give them credibility. And one, it that oh, I've never seen that work out in their favor. So just the con to play devil's advocate on our devil's advocate notion of a launch, you definitely want to give away some product if you're launching, to influencers and to brands, but you have to limit that and you have to have it in writing that you can evangelize the logo that you're doing the work for. Otherwise, a big brand is just going to totally take it. Big brands do this all the time. They'll do this with agencies where they'll come to an agency and say, "We're going to have a bake off." They call them bake offs, where it's like we're going to have 5 agencies compete for our business, and so here's the RFP, here's the creative, so here's what you're going to do, and you're going to do all this work up front in order to win our business. And they don't pay you for all the creative work. They pay
And
you
and
to answer. They don't even pay you to answer the RFP. And the answer is, here's the answer: if they're not willing to pay you something, or they're not willing to give you credit for the work that you do, then you shouldn't do it, because only the desperate agencies or desperate service companies are going to actually do that work because they really need it. So what a bake offs do for big companies is it gives subpar work for agencies that can't get work otherwise.
Yeah, and then they go to Ogilvy anyway, and you just wasted. And, yeah.
Exactly right.
All right, so I think we've talked around this. We've given some practical points here. We've talked about, okay, we need to think about this as a moment in time, this unique moment in time. There's one other point I want to make just before we transition. We've talked about some strategies on how to do that. Think about channels. Think about other opportunities. Show up at conferences. Send a bunch of emails. One of my favorite stories is terrific entrepreneur and founder, lived in Denver. I don't know where he's living now, but his name's Mike Stimple. He did Skin It, which is he put stickers on top of like Mini Coopers, and he sent physical stickers into the physical office, and he had FedEx things where they showed up at the office the same day. Like really terrific ideas. Any other just kind of ideas? And I know, again, the whole idea here is that if you growth hacks work exactly one time, but any other cool things that you've heard of just before we move into the speed round?
Yeah. So one story just popped into my head. You know how Post-it notes launched successfully?
No, I don't know
Um,
this one.
so the um the I don't remember one of the marketers. I don't remember who the person was, but they basically created a list of all executive assistants for big companies that they wanted to go after, and they sent them all free Post-it notes. They just sent it to them, and um, and then just followed up and said, "Hey, what do you think of these?" And she's like, "I love." They were like, she or he were like, "I love these things. How do I get more of them?" So oftentimes a great launch is just free product to the exact, like, sniper rifled um, audience. And if you can do that, right, an $8,000 mailbox, it's going to be really tough.
Right.
But if you can get your product in front of people that can evangelize the growth of it, that's really a strong launch mechanism.
There's one other point we'll make, and then we'll speed around, Anthony, which is there are people that have done this work in marketing and sales for a long time. And there's actually a book on it. I can't even remember the name of it, but there are magical words that you can use that get people's attention. The word you can use when you're launching a product that is magic is new. People are interested in new things. Some people like us, Anthony, that just love technology. Like anything that's new, we just love to try. We're on that early adopter side, but new is a magical word. And you can use that one time. You can use it for features down the road, but as a new company with a new story to tell people, you will get an additional layer of interest just because you're new if you execute this well. All right, speed round, Anthony. Are you ready? Okay. Anthony Franco, are on
in the
clock.
How to Founder podcast. Here we go.
I feel like I need a buzzer. Like, like when it runs out, it's just like, you're probably not going to let me have a buzzer. All right. Time versus money, Anthony. Focus on timing or spend more money. Like, what is the thing? How do I think about this? Is it a short period of time? Time. Okay. The build versus buy. Do you build your launch infrastructure or outsource it to experts? Build. Niche versus broad. Target a smaller core audience. Or
niche.
Okay.
Niche.
We did have our first Nietzsche reference before. Do not stare too long into the abyss. I'll go grab my philosophy books off of the shelf. Pre-orders versus launch day sales. We didn't talk about this. Pre-orders versus launch day sales. What do you think?
It's highly dependent. The answer is it depends.
Just real quickly, I know we didn't touch on this. Are you a fan of people signing up before you sign up? Before you get on the list, get on the waiting list.
It depends. It really depends on the pain point, how big the pain is. There's this notion of pain pill versus vitamin. What are you selling? People will buy pain pills way more often than they'll buy vitamins. So if you're solving a deep pain, pre-orders are really quite easy. If you're selling a vitamin, it's next to impossible.
That's a good point. I love pre-orders because it's a hack where you can just test individual pages and your conversion is an email. So even before you have a product, you can do that.
So there's that notion of soft launch. So one of the tactics is you launch a product that you don't have. I see a lot of entrepreneurs do this where they launch a product they don't have. They'll actually run ads on something that doesn't exist. Take the orders and then cancel the orders to test messaging and to test whether or not there's a product. That is an interesting hack. I don't love it, but it's an interesting hack that gives you great data.
All right. I promise I won't go down too far a rabbit hole here, but I love this because this is called the dummy branding approach in growth marketing. And the dummy brand is do that to a website you own that has nothing to do with your brand, because you are kind of being a little bit like you're just testing. And so you could send people to a 404 page or ask them to give them their email address and just say, hey, sorry, the product or service is not ready yet. Let us know when you're ready. You can do all those things. If you do it with your own brand, it kind of stings a little bit. Like, oh, my company is How to Founder. If I do that there, if you do it with some brand that you just spin up and, get a WordPress landing page on, nobody cares. Okay. Last one, organic versus paid, Anthony, in the speed round.
Early stage organic, late stage paid.
Got it. I love it. All right, Anthony, really good conversation. What did you take away? What are our key learnings from this conversation?
I think first is, and I don't make any money. I don't make any commission on this. I think you need to read the book, Play Bigger. I think
I am shocked. This is the first time in what episode, 42 episodes that you have talked about a book that I have not read. So I'm going to order that. I will read it or listen to it on Audible if I can
Well, I
find it. I
haven't
will do
read
it
the
over the
book.
weekend. Oh,
I'm kidding.
you read the Cliff Notes.
The back cover is amazing.
Yeah.
No, so yeah, go read Play Bigger, Thunderclaps, Lightning Bolts, that kind of stuff. Category creation, it's really great. Um, so fundamentally, the nuggets are launches really should be momentum machines. You should be building buzz before, during, and after. Um, Message to market fit is everything. Know your audience, speak their language, know the channel and speak their language. Um, Customer first always. So this is for launches and for everything else. This is like so fundamental. It's a trope. Create launches that resonate with real customer needs. Pain is better than vitamin. And then iteration does beat perfection here. So start, learn, redefine. If you can do a soft launch, great. If you can do like you called it dummy marketers,
Dummy branding, yeah. Create a dummy
dummy
brand.
branding, which that doesn't mean you're branding for people that are stupid. It means
I mean, maybe in my case, I don't know.
you're not selling pet rocks. So iteration beats perfection. Start, learn, refine, and iterate.
Really, really good stuff. I think the only other thing I would add there, Anthony, is a launch is not a year. You get about a month, go hard after it, create that momentum, and then realize that there is going to be a dip in momentum. And then your job is to push the rock back up the hill. Like you can't, I just, sometimes I feel like founders get really down when they're like, oh, I had all this momentum in the first month and now I don't have it. It's like, yeah, that's how this works. You got to go do it again. And just, that is the work that you're going to be on for the rest of your life. Deep dive recommendations, Anthony. We talk about the lean startup and crossing the chasm all the time, so I'm not going to do that. Made to Stick is a really good one. That's the Chip and Dan Heath. There is a good article called The Science of Viral Product Launches. It's a first round review. Really interesting there because virality and creating virality was such a huge piece that growth marketing came from. So we can geek out on that some other time. And Go to Market Mastery and How I Built This, Guy Raz, terrific podcast as well. So that's it, Anthony. I have an announcement to make. It is with great regret and sadness that I'm leaving the show.
Yeah, right.
For 2 episodes. On Monday, Tuesday, I'm just going to be out of the office, but you're going to be solo. Tell us what you got going on, man.
So next week, what are we talking about next week? I can't find my mouse to get to where.
Well, this is a good one, and I'm interested to see how this goes, and I'm glad that I'm not going to be here.
Oh, sales doesn't have to be a dirty word. We have a woman, Deborah Bowers, who's going to talk about sales and how you can make it so it's not smarmy and sleazy.
But you're also doing. I think we're doing one on Monday. Or you're doing one on Monday as I'm traveling.
Isn't that the one on Monday?
No, I think you're going to do politics and religion.
No, that's Tuesday.
Oh, that's Tuesday. Very good.
Yeah, so on Tuesday we're going to be talking about politics and religion, and whether or not politics and religion belong at work. And I think this is going to be a really interesting. I'm really looking forward to this because it's something that has come up quite a bit, and I think the answer is depends. On launching, actually, Chris and I are doing some really interesting things on the side of How to Founders. So Chris is launching this thing called Scale OS, which is essentially a growth marketing operating system. And that's just started. He's just started to launch it. I'm helping him a little bit with that. And then I also I help companies, specifically companies, launch direct to consumer. So manufacturers that have products that they want to launch direct to consumer, and that's so you can learn about Scale OS at scaleoperating.com, and you can learn about launch partners at usalaunchpartners.com. And How to Founder. More importantly, go to howtofounder.com. Follow us on all the platforms, and you'll also can get notified on when we're broadcasting next. Currently, we're broadcasting 2 to 3 times a week. We're extremely prolific.
It's because it's fun, Anthony. I enjoy it. I love hanging out and talking about this stuff. It's great.
Yeah,
and our wives don't have to hear us when we talk to each other. They don't have to, hear us monologue.
My wife doesn't hear me anyway. So, so that's it. That's it for this episode of Hadfinder. And by the way, thank you so much for tuning in, especially you, Jeff. But the rest, everybody that's tuning in, I really appreciate you.
But so hey, Jeff just posted. He said another great episode, Franco and Frank. So apparently, I have to change my name to Frank now. My name.
Oh. Chris just completely disappeared. So this is awkward. What can I say about Chris?
And then I hit the back button as I was doing that. I have to change my name and I'm out. So
I just said something about you as you were gone. We'll leave that between us.
That's amazing.
All right, everybody. Thanks for joining. We'll talk to you soon.